creepy warehouse, a horror story for the night. I never liked working the night shift, but the pay was good, and after a while, you tell yourself it's just another empty building. Nothing to be scared of. That's what I thought when I took the security job at Hawthorne Logistics, a massive warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place was a concrete labyrinth, filled with rows upon rows of towering metal shelves, stacked with everything from canned food to power tools. During the day, it was a bustling hub of activity, but at night, it was something else entirely. My first few weeks were uneventful. I'd walk my rounds, check the monitors, and kill time scrolling through my phone. But then, little things started happening. The kind of things you can write off as your mind playing tricks on you. Shadows shifting in the corners, faint whispers when no one else was around, and that knowing feeling that something was watching me. Then came the night I saw it. It started with a sound, something scuttling across the concrete floor, just out of sight. I turned, shining my flashlight between the shelves, but there was nothing. The security cameras flickered for a moment, then stabilized. That's when I saw movement in one of the aisles, tall, fast, and wrong. I ran to the monitor room and rewound the footage. There it was. A figure, unnaturally thin and hunched over, moving between the shelves. It didn't walk, it glided, limbs too long, fingers scraping against the metal racks. The worst part, it knew I was watching. The cameras cut to static. I heard something behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway, swallowing down the fear rising in my throat. The air was thick, heavy. The silence felt unnatural, like the whole warehouse was holding its breath. Then, a metallic clang echoed from deep within the storage area. I had to check it out. It was my job after all. As I made my way down the aisle, the shelves seemed taller, the shadows darker. The air smelled stale, like old metal and something else, something rotten. I turned a corner, and my flashlight landed on a pallet of dog food bags. One of them was torn open. Something had been eating it. I wasn't alone. A sudden skittering noise erupted behind me. I turned just in time to see something dart between the shelves. My breath caught in my throat. It was close. The lights above me flickered, casting the warehouse into momentary darkness. And then, just for a second, I saw it. Pale, stretched skin, hollow black eyes, a mouth that opened too wide, filled with teeth too sharp. It moved fast. Too fast. I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight. In the dark, I heard it breathing. Ragged, wet gasps. My fingers scrambled to grab the flashlight. I swung it up, but the easel was empty. I didn't wait. I ran. The warehouse seemed endless. The emergency exit was so far away. The sound of skittering grew louder behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I burst through the door into the cold night air and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I locked the doors, hands shaking as I struggled to breathe. The next morning, I quit. Didn't even pick up my last paycheck. A few weeks later, I heard from one of the other guards. They found another guy in there, hanging, 3 feet off the ground. No rope. They said it looked like something had been eating him. I don't know what's in that warehouse, but I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back. The Night Shift at the Old Factory, a horror story for the night. It was one of those late night conversations that only happen when you're too tired to sleep, but too wired to call it a night. Me and my buddy, Mike, were sitting in his dimly lit garage, sipping on cheap beer, the kind that tastes like regret but costs like a dream. The air was thick with the smell of motor oil and stale pizza, and the only sound was the occasional hum of the fridge kicking on. You know, Mike said, cracking open another can. I don't even remember the last time we hung out like this. Work's been a nightmare. I'm stuck on this night shift at the old factory, and it's something else. I raised an eyebrow. The old factory. That place has been abandoned for years, hasn't it? Not anymore, Mike replied, leaning back in his chair. Some big shot investor bought it, cleaned it up, and turned it into a distribution center. They hired me to manage the security system, cameras, alarms, the whole 9 yards. Sounds easy, right? But let me tell you, that place, it's not right. I chuckled, thinking he was just messing with me. Come on, Mike, what's so bad about it? Too much paperwork, boring shifts. He shook his head, his expression dead serious. No, man, it's not the work. It's the things that happen there. Stuff I can't explain. Stuff nobody can explain. I leaned in, intrigued despite myself. Alright, I'll bite. What kind of stuff? Mike took a long swig of his beer, then set it down with a clink. Alright, so the factory's got this history. Right back in the day, it was a textile mill. Lots of people worked there. Men, women, even kids. And let's just say safety standards weren't exactly a priority back then. There were accidents, fires. People died there. A lot of people. I nodded, starting to see where this was going. So what? You're saying the place is haunted? I'm saying, Mike continued, his voice low, that there's something in that factory that doesn't want us there. The first night I was on duty, I was setting up cameras in the main warehouse. It's this huge, open space with these massive steel beams running across the ceiling. I'm up on a ladder, wiring a camera, when I hear this sound like someone dragging a heavy chain across the floor. I look down, and there's nothing there, but the sound keeps getting closer. I swear, I could feel it, like the air was getting colder. I booked it out of there so fast, I almost fell off the ladder. I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Sounds like you've been watching too many horror movies, man. But Mike wasn't laughing. That's just the beginning. A few nights later, one of the guards called me in a panic. Said he saw something on the cameras. A figure walking through the warehouse. But when we checked the footage, there was nothing. Just static. And then there's the basement. The basement? I asked. My curiosity piqued. Mike nodded. Yeah, the basement. Nobody goes down there. Not even the maintenance guys. The door's always locked, and the key's missing. But sometimes, late at night, you can hear noises coming from down there. Like, like someone's crying or screaming. It's faint, but it's there. And the weirdest part, the cameras down there always go offline at the same time every night, 2:17 a.m. Exactly 2:17 every single night. I shivered despite the warmth of the garage. That's creepy. But come on, there's gotta be a logical explanation, right? Faulty wiring or something. Mike shrugged. Maybe. But then there's the shadow. The shadow? Yeah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes, when you're walking through the factory, you'll see it out of the corner of your eye, a dark shape just standing there. But when you turn to look, it's gone. And it's not just me. The other guards have seen it too. We call it the Watcher. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything he just told me. So, what do you do? Just ignore it. Mike laughed, but there was no humor in it. What else can we do? We're just the night shift. We're not ghost hunters. But let me tell you, every night I go in there, I feel like I'm being watched. Like something's waiting for me to make a mistake. And sometimes I wonder if it's not just the factory that's haunted. Maybe it's us. Mike paused, staring into his beer like it held the answers to all his questions. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. But there's one night I'll never forget. It was about a month ago. I was doing my usual rounds, checking the cameras, making sure everything was secure. Everything seemed normal until I got to the West Wing. The West Wing? I asked. Yeah, Mike said. It's the oldest part of the factory. They don't use it for storage or anything, it's just there. Most of the guards avoid it because it gives them the creeps. But that night, I noticed something strange on the cameras. One of the monitors showed a flickering light in the West Wing, like a flashlight or something. I thought maybe one of the guards had gone in there, so I radioed them. But they were all accounted for. Nobody was in the West Wing. I felt a chill run down my spine. So what did you do? Mike sighed. I went to check it out. I figured it was probably just a faulty light or something. But when I got there, it was different. The air was heavier, like walking through water. And the light, it wasn't coming from a flashlight. It was coming from one of the old machines, this huge rusted loom that hadn't been used in decades. It was just glowing, like it was alive. I stared at him, unsure if he was messing with me. You're kidding, right? Mike shook his head. I wish I was. And then I heard it, the sound of the machine starting up. It was loud, like a freight train roaring to life. But the weirdest part, the machine wasn't moving. It was just making noise. And then I saw them. Saw who? The workers, Mike said, his voice trembling. They were shadows, but they were solid, you know? Like they were real, but not. They were standing around the machine, pulling levers, feeding fabric into it. But there was no fabric, just nothing, and their faces, they were blank. No eyes, no mouths, just empty. I felt my stomach twist. What did you do? I ran, Mike said simply. I ran like hell. And when I got back to the security office, the cameras in the West Wing were all offline, just static. I didn't sleep for days after that. Mike took another swig of his beer, his hands shaking slightly. After that night, things got worse. The Watcher started showing up more often. The noises in the basement got louder. And then there was the incident with Greg. Greg, I asked. One of the other guards, Mike explained. He was a good guy, quiet, kept to himself. But one night, he didn't come back from his rounds. We found him in the West Wing, sitting in front of that damn loom. He was just staring at it. When we tried to talk to him, he didn't respond. He just kept whispering the same thing, over and over. It's not finished. It's not finished. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What happened to him? He quit the next day, Mike said. Didn't even give notice, just left. And I don't blame him. I would've done the same if I hadn't needed the money. Mike leaned back in his chair, looking exhausted. A few weeks later, I finally quit. I couldn't take it anymore. Every night, I felt like I was losing a piece of myself in that place. And the thing is, I don't think it's over. I think the factory is still there, still waiting. And I think it's always going to be waiting. We sat in silence for a while. After that, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Eventually, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Mike had left something out. Something he wasn't ready to talk about. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Mike had moved out of state. When I asked him about it, all he said was, "Some places, they just don't let you go." And then he changed the subject, like he was afraid to say anything more. I never did find out what really happened to him in that factory. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the shadows seem just a little too dark, I think about Mike's story. And I wonder if the Watcher is still out there, waiting for its next victim. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It helps the darkness spread. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next nightmare. And remember, don't listen to the whispers in the dark.